So my differential is failing with 6 days before round 3 of Formula Drift Pro Am. But we have to come up with a solution and fast, otherwise we're going to be out of contention for one of the biggest events of the year.
When it comes to drifting, one of the best things you can have is a good differential, which if you don't know what a differential does, they essentially take all that horsepower that you have in your beautiful engine and put it right to your axles to allow your wheels to spin for optimal grip. And when it comes to drifting, in order to have the best control while sliding, you want both your wheels spinning at the exact same speed. Now to do this, a lot of people either weld their diff or run a limited slip differential, also known as an LSD. Now what I personally do is I run an LSD with a friction modifier just to be extra safe to get both my wheels spinning at the same speed while allowing myself to still have a somewhat functioning daily. Now due to constant abuse of this thing, it's finally starting to fail, causing my beautiful drift car to one wheel peel like I'm trying to drift your mom's minivan. So let's bring this car into the Shift Culture shop and get this thing in the air as soon as possible, as we got 6 days to get this thing fixed and I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. Now once we got the car on the lift, it was on to planning out exactly what needed to come out before we could drop the differential. And if you don't know, this car started its life in New Jersey, where there's a lot of salt and grime on the road, especially during winter season. So a lot of things got rusted out, including the exhaust, which that's going to add in a whole nother subset of challenges to get this thing off without breaking anything further. It's like I gotta buy Dave a new attachment. But once we got the exhaust completely unbolted, our good friend Giuseppe showed up to the shop to help us remove the exhaust from the exhaust hangers. And with one good push, Giuseppe almost took me out with the actual exhaust itself. But we lowered the rest of the exhaust system down and it was on to disconnecting the drive shaft from the differential.
One bolt down. 5 to go.
Now, as easy as it looks to take out the drive shaft, this was a very, very long process. As not only were the bolts extremely stuck, they were super long. So the process to get this thing out was quite a pain. But once we got all the bolts out, we marked where the drive shaft is currently sitting. So when we go back to reinstall it later, it goes back in the exact same location. As if we don't do this, it's gonna knock everything out of balance and it will be an entire pain to fix. So a little bit of a silver Sharpie will save us a lot of headache. Then we moved on to removing the axles, which this turned out to be a lot more of a pain than we anticipated.
Alright, so the one problem we've just ran into is this little axle here doesn't slide out far enough to clear it, so that's, now we need to take the wheels off and then remove some of the stuff in the wheel assembly to actually get this to slide out, and then we can drop this. Try not to cut myself on the wire that's left on this tire.
Now with the wheels removed, it gave us plenty of access room to start disassembling the wheel hub assembly, which this was probably my least favorite part of this entire process, but we had to basically take apart the entire wheel hub assembly just to slide these axles out.
Alright, so now that both the wheels are off, we should have better access to access this little axle thing down here. We might have to remove the shock and a few other bolts. Once the axles are out, it's just 2 bolts, remove the differential, then we're just draining the diff fluid, cleaning the hell out of the pumpkin and all the splines and stuff. Then it's on to welding and putting it back together. This is simple enough, which I'm not gonna lie, I didn't want to jinx it, but so far this is going a lot smoother than I thought. I thought we would have ran into some severe issues by now.
Now, if you're sitting at home asking why we're doing all of these steps just to weld the differential, this is a lot safer of a method to do instead of just trying to weld the differential inside the pumpkin, otherwise known as the differential casing. And while yes, it's easier to do it while it's still attached to the car, with 6 days to go before round 3 of Formula Drift Pro Am, I was not about to risk welding my axles to my differential, which would be a very, very expensive problem and one we couldn't fix for the event. Now, the chances of that happening are very slim, but I'd rather not risk it. So we're going the extra steps just to get this done.
If that thing budges on the first go, I'll be impressed.
Call me impressed. I'm surprised that thing just popped right off. Now once I removed the entire brake assembly, it was on to detaching the top half of the wheel hub. This is so we can angle it downward, giving us just enough room so Giuseppe can slide out the remainder part of the axle right out of the differential. Now if you don't know, limited slip differentials are extraordinarily heavy, so we're gonna try and give ourselves a little bit of a break by draining the differential before we actually try and lift it down from the car.
How heavy is this diff gonna be when it falls?
So f***ing heavy. And you have one arm with issues, so...
Now, as simple as it may seem to unbolt this thing, it was still a very long process to get all 4 of the bolts removed. But once everything was unbolted, we dropped the differential down so we could start working on cleaning out the actual pumpkin, the differential itself, and get all the other parts all prepped and ready for welding.
All right, so we need to make a quick pit stop to AutoZone because we need the proper tool to get the rest of this disassembled, which that should be fun.
Oh my god, it's hot, bro.
No shit, it's been sitting in the sun. Well, according to Giuseppe, this is a Ford-only tool where you can only get it from Ford. But you're convinced that you can find this.
Yeah.
You didn't decide to Google this before we came to AutoZone?
No, don't worry about it. I'm just looking here some stuff.
If O'Reilly doesn't have it, we're gonna go back, try it again with just taking our sweet ass time with it. But even then, Giuseppe was still like borderline stripping the bolt. That's where I'm getting a little stressed about because I don't want to strip all of my fucking differential bolts. This doesn't seem like a very common tool.
Now I'm starting to concern about it. Before it was fine, but now I'm not so fine.
Do we check Home Depot? If they have it online, they might have it in store.
Which, after a long search through Home Depot, they ultimately didn't have the socket that we were looking for. But thankfully, Vic thought of a solution on our way back that might save us just in time to get this whole thing done, and this car loaded on the trailer right before the event. Now, this may seem a little bit unconventional, but Vic found the solution to be finding a bit that was just not the right size and hammering it onto the bolt itself, and very, very carefully unscrewing it from there. This somehow didn't damage any of the bolts. However, it did put it at a very high risk of stripping each and every bolt every time we undid it. But thankfully, nothing went wrong during the deinstallation. Now it's just more of a concern of how we're gonna torque these things back down. Nevertheless, it was on to removing the actual LSD from the pumpkin or casing itself, which this process was fairly simple. We just had to make sure to keep all the parts as organized as possible so they go back in the exact same way. As if we screw that part up, then the whole differential is not gonna function right, and that's gonna lead to further problems, especially when you're on track.
All right, this is the part I'm not looking forward to in any way, shape, or form. It's time to hit this with so much brake cleaner, I'm gonna pass out.
Now, the reason we have to use so much brake cleaner is to make sure that the surface that we're going to be welding on is absolutely pristine. As if there's just the slightest bit of dirt or debris, the welds won't stick the way we want them to, which can be very dangerous, causing the entire differential to completely fail. So we're going to make sure that this thing is absolutely spotless. However, I almost blinded myself during the cleaning process as I sprayed the brake cleaner right into the pumpkin and it shot directly into my eye. Which, if you've ever gotten brake cleaner in the eye, it's not the most comfortable feeling in the world. But after washing my eyes out, we have to let these parts sit overnight, as brake cleaner itself is very flammable. So trying to weld on a flammable surface might not end super well. So it's time to head home for the night and then come back in the morning to start the welding process and get this whole thing knocked out.
All right, we are back officially on day 2 of this. It still smells like diff fluid in here.
Now, I showed up a tiny bit late this morning and Giuseppe had already finished welding majority of the LSD. And now he was just chipping away at all the debris, so nothing was floating around inside the differential casing. But once that was all cleaned away, it was on to hitting it again with some brake cleaner to make sure that it was absolutely spotless before reinstalling it into the pumpkin. Now, once we got the LSD back into the pumpkin, it was on to bolting the casing back together, which is what we talked about earlier in this video. And this felt a little bit on the sketchy side, as we have to torque these bolts down properly, and we don't have the right bit to do so. Now, as you saw earlier, we removed them by taking the wrong size socket and hammering it onto the bolt. Now, to torque these back down somewhat properly, we're gonna try the same process, only this time we're gonna hand screw everything back on until they're just about ready to get torqued down, and then we're gonna take that same exact socket and hammer it back onto the bolt to torque everything down. But once we got the full differential back together, it was on to throwing it back in the car, which this was not the easiest process. But once we got it all bolted together, it was on to reinstalling the drive shaft, which, like we talked about earlier in the video, we had perfectly marked where the drive shaft needs to sit inside the differentials, so we don't need to balance anything out, which this required a little bit of twisting and turning to get it to line up perfectly before we threw the bolts in. But once we got everything torqued down to spec, it was on to getting the axles back into the wheel assembly and then screwing on the axle nut, which I made that sound way more simple than it actually was.
I realized I completely forgot to hit record on that camera, so not bad. But we got the wheel assembly put back together, and all that's left, I think, is put the wheels back on the car, the exhaust, and then fill it with diff fluid. And then I think we're good.
Now that we got the back half of the car reassembled, it was on to putting the exhaust system back in. And I was being extra careful here because, like I said earlier, the exhaust system was beyond rusted, so one little slip up can screw up this entire thing. Now we will be getting a new exhaust system for this car down the road, but right now that's not really on the top of my priority list. However, once the exhaust was all put back together, we were good to drop the car back down and actually test to see if the new differential is functioning properly.
Need some assistance here.
What?
Filming. We're gonna blow the tires out the car. If I don't end up blowing it off, I just want to test it because we want to make sure that the thing
You
is...
can just do it. I'll just use some of that footage then.
How's it feel so far?
Feels decent. We're about to find out how it's...
Just don't hit my drift. My drift car is in good shape, so don't mess it up, okay?
I'll try not to pop out the tail.
Now, as you can see in the footage here, you can actually see my back tire spinning when I'm just turning at slow speeds, which is a really good sign that we did this properly, as both wheels are spinning at the exact same rate.
He's like a kid in a freaking candy shop every time he gets something else done to his car.
What's crazy is when I was turning that, it just chirped so loud when I just did a U-turn.
Oh, that was the bird you ran over.
You think the motor's warm enough?
I think you're at 200 degrees already, bro. It's a
You
Mustang.
think the motor's warm enough?
Just send the sucker. Hey, go in.
So our little makeshift creation fully works. And honestly, as I'm doing donuts, I'm realizing how much more controllable the car feels now that they are definitely spinning at the same rate. The problem I was running into with the friction modifier is it only really worked about 65% of the time. So the fact that this is now guaranteed to work 100% of the time gives it such a different feel for driving. Now the only thing left for me to do was to test to see if I could blow the tires off, because there wasn't much tread left. Or so I thought.
Not blow up. They are like this close to explode. How does it feel? It feels so much more controllable. Like 10,000 times more controllable. 10,000? Oh, it's like a night and day difference.
If you notice, I can hear it. If you notice, you're not as high on RPMs, but you're still spinning.
No.
You actually look like you know what you're doing now.
It's actually so much easier to control. I think we're gonna rip.
And you got port on the outside now.
Yeah, so it's burning even now. We got a functioning car. Woo-hoo! I went to move it 3 inches, and it now it blows up. Where did it pop? Okay, so if I did like one more donut, it would have just blown off. See what happens when you quit too soon? All right, well, we technically did blow the tire off, but not in the way I was. That was the most lackluster tire explosion I've ever had. Yeah, well, that's unfortunate. All right, well, if you enjoyed today's video, drop a like, hit the subscribe button. But anyways, I love you all so much, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.